Welcome back to Starz Recapped. In this video, we break down the entire story, key twists, and hidden details of the film in a simple, engaging way. Whether you missed something or just want a quick recap, this explanation covers everything you need to know: plot, characters, and the ending, all summarized clearly for easy understanding. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more movie breakdowns every week. The story opens during a lively American football game. In the VIP section, a man named Nicky relaxes beside his partner, Jess. The crowd roars for the match, but Nicky's eyes wander everywhere except the field. He isn't watching the players, he's observing people. Just then, a stunning woman stands up and heads toward the exit. Nicky smirks as an idea pops into his mind. He leans toward Jess and says, "Want to bet on how many heads she turns on her way out?" A man sitting nearby, who introduces himself as Lewin, overhears them and joins in. Soon, all three toss $10 into the tiny challenge and begin counting the glances. As the woman walks out of the stands, they tally the final number. 7 people turn to look. Jess's guess comes closest, making her the winner. Lewin hands over the small prize with a laugh and immediately proposes another round. This time, the bet is on who will commit the next foul in the match. Jess steps back, saying she barely knows the rules. But Nicky jumps in confidently and places $1,000 on his pick. The whistle blows, the referee signals the foul, and Nicky's choice turns out to be correct. He pockets his winnings calmly. Instead of giving up, Lewin gets even more excited. He pushes for a bigger challenge, $5,000. The question now is simple but risky. Will the next play be a pass or a run? Nicky hesitates for a moment, but eventually nods. Lewin predicts a run. Nicky chooses a pass. The whistle echoes again. The player charges forward with the ball, and Nicky loses $5,000 in an instant. Nicky sighs and decides that's enough gambling for now. He suggests to Jess that they grab some coffee and leave this madness behind. But Lewin refuses to let things end there. "You're in the VIP lounge," he says confidently. "5,000 shouldn't rattle you. Let's raise it, 10,000 this time." After a moment of pressure and temptation, Nicky finally gives in. The next wager shifts to a simple question: will the upcoming pass be clean or will something go wrong? Nicky confidently predicts that the pass will land perfectly. But the moment the play begins, the ball is snatched by the opposing team. Another loss. His total is now down by $15,000. As he pulls out the cash, frustration flashes across his face. He pauses, breathes hard, and suddenly declares, "Let's raise the stakes, 50,000. Jess is stunned, unable to understand why he's pushing himself deeper into trouble. But Nicky's anger has taken control. Misfortune continues to follow him. The next prediction fails again, and 50,000 more slips out of his hands. Jess pleads with him to walk away, but Nicky's ego refuses to surrender. Without even thinking, he slams down another bet, this time for $100,000. Lewin bursts into laughter, poking fun at him. "Do you even have that kind of money?" he jokes. Nicky responds by placing a thick stack of cash onto the table without saying a word. The sight only fuels Lewin's excitement. This round, Nicky bets that the next throw will be intercepted. But destiny seems to enjoy mocking him today. The pass goes through flawlessly. Another 100,000 lost. Nicky's mind is spinning, and Jess is horrified at how far things have escalated. But the chaos doesn't stop there. "I have 1 million left," Nicky mutters through clenched teeth. "Let's put everything on the line. One final bet." The last gamble won't be decided by the game anymore, but by a simple draw of cards. Lewin, soaked in confidence from his winning streak, is practically buzzing with energy now. To him, Nicky looks less like a rival and more like a walking cash dispenser. Lewin draws first, a 5 of clubs, not a strong card. Nicky only needs something higher to win it all back. With steady hands but a storm brewing inside him, Nicky flips his card dramatically. It's the 3 of hearts. Jess falls back in shock. Nicky, who had originally joined in on a small $10 joke bet, has now lost over $1 million in a single disastrous streak. After losing so disastrously, Nicky had no words left. Silently, he took Jess by the hand and headed toward the exit, the weight of defeat heavy on his shoulders. But Lewin wasn't finished. He taunted Nicky loudly, bragging about how the master always wins. Nicky stopped in his tracks. Something snapped inside him. He turned back and calmly announced a massive new wager, $2 million. This time, the rules were different. Nicky told Lewin to pick any player from the field using a telescope. If Nicky could correctly guess that player's jersey number, the entire pot would be his. Lewin blinked, confused. It sounded impossible, like a trick. He even suspected Nicky might be trying to cheat. To shut down any doubt, Nicky raised the stakes further. "I won't guess," he said. "Jess will." Jess stared at Nicky in disbelief. She had no idea what kind of madness he was pulling. "How am I supposed to guess one number out of thousands of people?" she whispered angrily. She tried to walk away, but one of Lewin's guards blocked her path, causing a brief scuffle before she calmed herself. Nicky leaned close and quietly told her, "Don't overthink it. Just look around the field. Pick the number that feels like it belongs to you." Meanwhile, Lewin lifted the binoculars and selected a random player somewhere in the massive crowd of athletes. Jess reluctantly took the binoculars next. Her eyes darted across the field, dozens of jerseys, countless numbers. How could she possibly guess the right one? Then something caught her eye, a familiar face. Their friend Farhad, disguised as a player wearing jersey number 55. Suddenly, everything clicked. Nicky had set this up from the beginning. His calmness finally made sense. Jess took a deep breath and said confidently, "Number 55." Lewin lowered the telescope, stunned silent. She was right. Even Jess couldn't understand how Nicky had predicted that Lewin would choose that exact player. But none of that mattered anymore. The bet was theirs. Not only did they win back every dollar Nicky had lost, but they walked away with an extra $1 million in profit. Jess and Nicky left the stadium carrying 2 huge bags stuffed with cash, disappearing into the crowd with quiet triumph. Inside the car, as the city lights blurred past, Nicky finally revealed the truth to Jess. Every moment in that stadium, every risky bet, every reaction, none of it had been spontaneous. It was all part of a carefully crafted trap. For weeks, they had been studying Lewin. In elite circles, he was famous for one thing: reckless gambling. If someone waved a bet in front of him, he couldn't resist. Knowing this weakness, Nicky's team constructed a psychological maze tailored just for him. The number 55 had been quietly woven into every corner of Lewin's day long before they reached the stadium. The security guard who greeted him wore a badge labeled 55. The route leading to the arena was dotted with signboards carrying the same number. Even the music playing in his car that afternoon repeated 55 relentlessly, over 100 times, embedding the number deeper and deeper into his subconscious. They didn't merely want him to see the number, they wanted him to feel it. A photograph of Farhad wearing a jersey with 55 had also been shown to Lewin earlier, just long enough for the image to stick in his mind. So when Lewin finally looked through those binoculars, his brain naturally gravitated toward the player wearing that same number, Farhad, who was secretly working with Nicky the entire time. Jess, on the other hand, had been kept completely unaware of the plan. Her confusion, her fear, her frustration, all of it was real, and that authenticity ensured no one suspected her involvement. When she recognized Farhad and the number 55, she simply followed Nicky's strange advice and said the number that felt like hers. And the plan snapped into place perfectly. Hearing all this, Jess couldn't hide her amazement. Nicky's strategy wasn't luck, it was pure manipulation blended with psychology. She saw him in a completely new light. The story then shifts back in time. Just a few days earlier, Nicky lies on a bed inside a dimly lit room, Jess sitting beside him. A man stands over them with a gun pointed at Nicky's head. Jess, who was still new in his life, had lured him into that room using her own trickery. But Nicky shows no fear. He stares calmly at the gunman and says, "I don't have any money. If you're going to pull the trigger, do it." The gunman hesitates. Something about Nicky's expression, his voice, it wasn't fear. It was confidence, a dangerous kind. The man realizes instantly that this is no ordinary victim. Nikki is sharper than anyone in that room, maybe even more cunning than the criminals pointing guns at him. And he was right. Nikki was a seasoned con artist, a master of small and large schemes alike. Jess had brought him here by fooling him. Yet, despite being tricked, he could see something in her, a spark, instinct, natural talent. And that was where their strange partnership began. Back in that small room, Jess stood there confused, not fully understanding what had just happened. As soon as the man with the gun walked away, Nikki turned to her calmly. "You've got something special," he told her. "Most people freeze in situations like this, but you have instinct. If you sharpen that, you could live a life most people only dream of." Then he shared something personal, something he rarely revealed. "For my family, this isn't just work. It's heritage. My father, my grandfather, they all lived off their wits. Deception is our craft. Every move is a strategy, every trick a lesson." Jess listened carefully. Without hesitation, she pulled some money from her bag and said, "Teach me." Nikki nodded. As they walked outside, Jess felt lighter until she realized her ring was missing. A second later, she noticed her watch had vanished too. By the time she opened her handbag to check, her wallet was gone as well. Nikki smiled and returned everything one by one. "Sleight of hand, timing, confidence. That's the formula," he said. Then, with a casual wave, he walked away. Months later, Jess tracked him down in New Orleans. She discovered that Nikki was assembling a brand new crew. Their reunion wasn't just coincidence. It was Nikki's test to see whether Jess was ready to step into the real world of con artistry. Once she agreed to join, Nikki sent her out for her first field assignment at a crowded fair. She walked around holding a map, pretending to be lost, distracting tourists while her partner quietly lifted camera lenses. Another teammate deliberately bumped into a stranger, and Jess slipped the man's wallet out without missing a beat. With each successful move, Jess felt her confidence growing. Using a pair of chopsticks, she plucked a wallet from a woman's handbag so smoothly that the woman didn't even pause her conversation. High above the fairgrounds, Nikki watched everything from a rooftop. He instructed the others to step back. It was time to see what Jess could do alone, and she didn't disappoint. One by one, she picked off valuables from distracted visitors, moving with style and precision. Nikki couldn't help but be impressed. Soon, he introduced her to more advanced work, tech-driven scams. With special contact lenses, they could see opponents' cards during high-stakes games and win effortlessly. They also used a clever system for stealing credit card data. One thief would lift the card, another would clone it with a hidden device, and then the card would be slipped back into the victim's pocket before they ever noticed. And then there was the fake ATM. It looked real from the outside, but every time someone made a withdrawal, it secretly stored their PIN, allowing the crew to empty accounts later. Jess's training had begun, and she was proving she was more than just a beginner. Farhad's job came later. Once the fake ATM collected enough information, he would quietly remove the machine and extract every bit of stored data. Back at their warehouse, stacks of stolen credit cards were organized into neat piles. Some were used to purchase luxury goods. Others were sorted for resale. The remaining data was eventually shipped off to the black market, where each stolen identity had its own price. One afternoon, Jess spotted a stunning necklace among the piles of stolen merchandise. She slipped it around her neck, admiring herself in a cracked mirror. But Nikki immediately stopped her. "Take it off," he said firmly. "Nothing here belongs to us. Everything gets sold. No exceptions." Jess was still new to operations on this scale. Standing in a room overflowing with stolen goods felt unreal, like she had stepped into another world entirely. The next day, Jess and Farhad headed into a wealthy neighborhood for their next assignment. Their job wasn't to steal, but to perform. In the middle of the street, Farhad collapsed on cue, pretending to faint. Jess began shouting for help, putting on a convincing display of panic, while the wealthy residents gathered around them in concern. The rest of the crew slipped through the crowd, picking pockets and lifting valuables. Once the job was done, everyone regrouped in a disguised ambulance and sped away. The entire operation unfolded so flawlessly that not a single person realized they had been robbed. That night, The crew held a celebration. Laughter, drinks, and loud music filled the room as Nikki praised the team. They had earned over $1.2 million in just 7 days. By morning, the mood shifted. It was time to disappear. Everyone gathered their belongings, burned fake IDs, and prepared to split up. Nikki promised that their shares would be transferred to their account soon. But the veterans of the team exchanged knowing looks. They understood something Jess didn't. Nikki wasn't finished yet. One final job still waited. The following morning, Nikki brought Jess to the VIP lounge overlooking the stadium. From there, he walked her through an entire operation, step by step, showing how $1 million could be earned in mere minutes if every move was executed perfectly. Jess watched him with admiration glowing in her eyes. She believed he was letting her into his world because she meant something special to him. In truth, Nikki had only involved her to strengthen his plan. When the job was done, he handed her a stack of cash, $80,000, and told her it was time to part ways. Jess stared at him, tears welling up. Her heart shattered. She had fallen for him, believed they were something more than partners in crime. Seeing him walk away with $1 million while tossing her a small fraction felt like betrayal. But in Nikki's world, feelings were liabilities, and Jess finally understood who he really was. Nearly 3 years passed. A race car rolled into a dusty service station, and Nikki stepped out. He looked worn down, tired eyes, frayed edges, like he had been running on fumes for a long time. During lunch, he met George, the owner of a professional racing team. George's engineers had created a new algorithm called EXR, designed to give racers a competitive edge. But George wanted to enhance it further. That's where Nikki came in. George hired him for a stage deception. Nikki would pose as the team's lead engineer. They would then fake a huge falling out in public, luring rival teams into believing Nikki had been unfairly fired. Taking the bait, the rivals would buy a copy of EXR from Nikki, one that Nikki would intentionally sabotage. Meanwhile, George's team would quietly use the flawless real version and win the championship with ease. For this job, Nikki would earn €1 million, plus whatever he pocketed from selling the fake system. To Nikki, the whole con felt almost too easy, child's play compared to what he'd done before. But George's butler didn't share that confidence. He stared Nikki down and warned him coldly, "If you cross us, I'll put a bullet in your chest." Later that evening, dressed in a sharp tuxedo, Nikki arrived at a high-profile party where the staged fight with George was supposed to happen. But the plan collapsed the moment Jess appeared at the top of the staircase, draped in a red dress that drew every eye in the room. She wrapped her arms around George as if she belonged there. Anger surged through Nikki. He hadn't seen her in 3 long years, and now she was with the man who had hired him. His chest tightened, his mind spinning. Jess approached him calmly, her expression unreadable. She told him she had left the life of cons behind, and whatever happened between them years ago didn't matter anymore. She added that George had no idea about their past, and that it should stay that way. That pushed Nikki over the edge. He grabbed a glass of vodka, downed it in one gulp, and glared at her. Moments earlier, he had planned to pretend to be furious as part of the act. But now the anger burning through him was real. When he confronted George in front of everyone, their argument erupted into a genuine fight rather than the scripted performance they had planned. Ironically, that raw, emotional explosion was exactly what the rival racing team noticed, just as Nikki and George had intended. Security eventually dragged Nikki out of the celebration, but he left with exactly what he wanted: the rival team's contact card clenched in his hand. The following morning, Nikki walked straight into a meeting with the head of the McLaren racing crew. He didn't waste a second. With full confidence, he said, "I can get you the EXR system for €3 million. Money wasn't an issue for the team owner. He immediately tested the sample file on the track, and when the car's performance spiked, he was sold. Nikki promised the full package would be ready within 2 days. On the other side of town, Jess ran into Farhad by chance. But this wasn't coincidence. Nikki had sent him. Farhad explained why Nikki vanished 3 years earlier, telling her he had no option and that he still cared for her. Then he handed her a small box containing the necklace she once adored. Real or fake, it still carried meaning. Jess insisted she couldn't trust Nicky again, yet her eyes betrayed her. She wasn't over him. When the day of the transaction arrived, Nicky showed up and delivered the software to the McLaren team. In exchange, a bulky security man placed a case full of €3 million in his hands. But Nicky never settled for just one risk. He lived off bold moves. Quietly, he had duplicated the same Yexar system and sold it to every single team in the championship. Each handshake brought him another fortune. Team after team, all thinking they had the ultimate winning advantage. None of them knew they had the exact same program. That night, instead of disappearing with the money, Nicky sent one final message to Jess. If she arrived in time, the two of them could run away together. Nicky waited in the dark, hope slowly dying. He finally turned to leave, only for Jess to show up at the last moment. But their reunion didn't matter anymore, because just then, the same heavy-built man who had given Nicky the money stepped into the light. He wasn't from McLaren at all. He worked for George, and he had discovered the truth. Nicky had handed the real system to McLaren and tricked everyone else. He didn't care about the missing payment. What he wanted was payback. Wearing full racing armor, he climbed into his car, revved the engine, and slammed straight into Nicky's vehicle on purpose. After the violent crash, Nicky and Jess ended up in the hands of George's men. They were tied to chairs while piles of stolen cash lay scattered in front of George like an accusation. George was fuming. He had poured €40 million into developing that priceless software, and now everything had blown up in his face. What bothered him most was not the money. It was the fact that he still had no idea how Nicky managed to steal the genuine version. Nicky kept his mouth shut, so George grabbed Jess and pinched her nose, cutting off her breath. Watching her gasp pushed Nicky over the edge. His composure shattered, and he spilled the story. He explained how he used Jess's old feelings to get close to her again, how the necklace he gifted her wasn't just jewelry, but a device hiding a chip. When George accessed the program, the chip silently copied his login and duplicated the data. Jess stared at Nicky, devastated. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but George and his men burst into laughter. They enjoyed the dramatic story but didn't buy any of it. George smirked and told Jess he knew she never loved him anyway. She confessed the truth herself. She had only played the part of his girlfriend to steal his expensive watch collection. Nicky froze. That meant Jess's romantic act had been nothing but a trick, just to make him jealous. Both of them were trapped now. George turned to his butler and demanded to know how Nicky pulled off the theft. Nicky opened his mouth to answer, but before he could finish, the butler suddenly fired his gun. The bullet slammed into Nicky's chest. George went pale instantly. Killing Nicky had never been part of the plan. Panicking, George shouted that he could always rebuild his fortune, but facing a murder charge would destroy him. He fired the butler on the spot and sprinted out of the warehouse with his men. Jess sobbed helplessly beside Nicky's slumped body, but the butler remained strangely calm. He leaned toward Jess and whispered, "Relax, I'm one of Nicky's people." In reality, the butler was Nicky's adoptive father, the man who had raised him and taught him every con he knew. The bullet had been aimed carefully, missing the heart by a slim margin. He patched up the wound with tape, released trapped air from Nicky's chest with a needle, and within moments, Nicky gasped back to life. It was insane, but the plan had worked. They stood quietly for a moment, staring at the mountain of cash behind them. Nicky's father took all of it and dropped the young couple off on the side of the road. Their old rule was simple: never let emotions get in the way. But Nicky had broken that rule. He had fallen for Jess for real. He had nothing left now, or so he thought. On the way to the hospital, Nicky noticed a familiar sparkle in Jess's hand. She was holding one of George's watches, the one worth €200,000. Jess looked at him. Nicky looked back. A smile spread across both their faces. With skills like theirs and a little sleight of hand, they would never be broke. Not anywhere. Not ever. And that wraps up today's story. If you enjoyed this movie breakdown, make sure to hit the like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and share this video with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more thrilling stories and breakdowns just like this. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.